Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Mocktail Minutes. This is Bailey.
And this is Brianna.
This week, I am drinking Olipop, the tropical punch, and I like it. It tastes like normal, like Hawaiian fruit punch with a
Yeah,
fizz. So I like the tropical punch. I haven't had this one yet.
nice. I don't think I've had that one either. I'm doing a recess, the lime citrus, which I actually really like. I don't usually like lime, but I like it.
Well, this week we are talking about processed foods versus ultra processed foods. I think this kind of follows up nicely with the episode we did. It'll be 2 weeks now.
Mhm.
Talking about like what everything that's going on with Kellogg's, the dyes. And so if you missed that episode, be sure to go back. But we're gonna dive into processed versus ultra processed because there is a difference. And it's mainly on how much they are processed. Basically, your processed foods, these are just foods that have been altered from their natural states just for like preservation. It could be for convenience or it could be to, like enhance the taste. So
Mhm.
it could be as simple as like canning it or freezing it or like carrots when they're the baby carrots. Or it can
Yeah.
also be like if it's fermented or dried. Those are processing methods. So canned vegetables, whole grain bread, frozen fruits, plain yogurt even, those
Mhm.
are all examples of processed foods.
Yeah.
However, they can have, or the idea is that they do have like few added ingredients. It could be like sugar, salt, oils, but it's generally ingredients that you would recognize and it's not like that laundry list. So
Mhm.
they tend to retain more of their nutrients and can even sometimes be more beneficial, especially frozen fruits and vegetables, for example, can be have more nutrients because they're frozen at peak ripeness.
And I always tell people that about frozen because I feel like they don't know that. But I'm like,
Mhm.
no, frozen is great. It's usually yeah, a little bit more nutrients because by the time you're getting your produce at a grocery store, it's been a while
Yeah.
since produce has been picked. But and I always I remember like I don't know what was it like food science, whatever like intro to food science class that you take when you're getting your undergrad in nutrition is like you learn like oh my god everything is processed, and so there's a
Hmm.
big difference between like processed foods and then how we kind of connect them to those ultra processed foods, which would be the next one. But yeah, anything that's not in its natural state is processed, and sometimes it's for the better for a lot of things, right? Like it's okay, but it's really the ultra processed foods that we want to be mindful of, like the crackers, the cookies, the sweets, like all the baked goods. So these are foods that undergo multiple stages of processing and contain numerous ingredients including artificial colors, flavors, emulsifiers, preservatives, etc. Like I always like to tell people, if you want to know how processed something is, look at the expiration date. If it's not
Hmm.
soon, it's probably ultra processed. Like that's why you can make like fresh baked bread and it'll go bad on your counter like day 3. It's like rock hard or just you can't eat it. And you can go get a bag or a bread at the store, like Wonder Bread, literally will like last months. Like,
Yes.
it'll just never go bad.
Yeah,
So
it just keeps going.
yeah. And so those wines are like, they're just highly industrialized, pro, highly industrialized and processed. It's still for the same reasons as the normal processed foods. They want it to last longer, texture, shelf life, but it's just a lot more like, I guess, just the processing process. And I do like to point out that it's all kind of like in phases because technically things like protein powders are ultra processed. It's pretty processed to get protein powder in that form. So I just always like to point that out because I think people get really on the bandwagon of like we have to do extra clean foods and no processed foods and we do all this, but then I always think of
Hmm.
Bobby, who's like none of this is horribly processed, and then he's selling his like supplements and protein powder and trying to say it's not processed. I'm like, it is, so it was like greens and stuff like that. So it's kind of one of those things you want to balance, right? Like you do want to minimize the amount of ultra processed foods you're eating. And so you got to kind of see like, I mean, is the majority of the things that I'm eating every single day ultra processed? Like it shouldn't be. The majority of your stuff should be whole foods.
A lot of those ultra processed foods, I would say it's much easier to overeat on them because they tend to be higher in added sugars. So they almost get that like addictive feeling because you're on this blood sugar roller coaster. Like, and if something has more added sugars, Number one, blood sugar roller coaster. But number two, carbs do not shut down your hunger hormones as well as protein does. So
Mhm.
then you just want more and more and more. It's really hard to satisfy that hunger. And it's things like sodas, for example. Sodas have a ton of added sugar in it, but it's not like you can drink a soda and it's not like really doing anything for you. It's not really filling you up. Same things like chips, cookies, pretzels, like ramen noodles, the breakfast cereals, the cosmic brownies, candy, just those types of things. They're going to have lots of preservatives added. They have artificial flavors, they have sweeteners, they have emulsifiers, they have colorings, all these things added. And this is where I see if you're in the boat of feeling like it's too expensive to eat healthy, these are the things you cut back on. And not only will you feel a lot better, but your grocery bill will look a lot smaller because
Mhm.
you're getting rid of the things that aren't really doing really anything for your body.
Right.
Might give
Like
you a quick burst of energy,
you
but
can like snack on all of those foods in large amounts all day and like not feel hungry. So you do need more of those foods to feel full, as opposed to, let's say something is like $8, like, oh, I could get, three things of chips for that. Yeah, but you could also get something else that's going to really fill you up. So it's just, it's deciding like, where do I want my dollar to stretch, because it is expensive, and there's,
mhm,
the whole politics behind like why somebody doesn't get more money for fresh fruits and vegetables if they're on, government aid. That's a whole nother thing. Like, but yeah, these highly processed foods, they're the ones that are linked to like a lot of those increased health risks. So we're talking like diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver, like all of those things. And I think this is also where like sugar and saturated fat gets a really bad rap. Like it came from it being in ultra like processed foods, because it's really high in saturated fat, and it's also high in added sugar. And so then everyone's like, oh, sugar and fat's killing us. It's like, well, we still need sugar and fat, but not in the amounts that we're having it on a day-to-day basis. Like if you were to just look at all your packaged foods, for example, like look at maybe the snack bars that you have during the day and the cereal that you eat in the morning, and tell me how much saturated fat and sugar is in it, and then tell me how much of it you actually have to eat to be full. And then that's where you're realizing like, oh wow, I'm consuming a lot of
mhm.
extra stuff, where it's completely different. Like you go have a little bit of beef that has saturated fat, you're going to eat much less, it's going to make you full, you're going to get more nutrients from it. If they're not the same. Like food quality is very important, it's not just the individual nutrients.
Absolutely. Yes. It depends on, yeah, exactly like what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Pop-Tart, cereal, Quaker's granola bar, anything like that. It's not a true breakfast.
Yeah.
So start finding different swaps, and it's just like the story of donuts versus eggs. They could be the same price. Donuts might be a little bit cheaper, but you're gonna keep wanting more to eat. Eggs are actually gonna satisfy you. You're going to get amino acids. You're gonna get choline, B vitamins, healthy
Mm-hmm.
fats. So you get the other things along with it instead of just your filler foods. That's
Right.
kind of what I just call them. They're just like your filler foods. They might
Yeah.
give you a little dopamine hit, but when you're just chasing these dopamine hits all the time for food, this is when your wheels just start turning and turning,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be a lot harder to reach your goals. Even if you don't have weight loss goals, this is important even for your kids, for everyone, because this is what their body is running off of. Do we want
Yeah.
it running off a bunch of artificial ingredients, or do we want it running off of these foods that were like coming from the ground?
Yeah.
And
And yeah.
I
Yeah.
also don't think it's necessary. Like I've seen videos that like, oh, don't eat baby carrots because they're processed. I'm like,
They're fine. They're literally just cut.
yeah,
I actually, did we talk about this, or did I talk? I might have talked to my husband about this, like the story
we might have.
behind
I don't know.
like who created the baby carrot and why. I think we had a guest speaker on about this, but how like the certain smaller carrots were like less desirable in the store because they didn't have like a good shape or anything. And so some guy was like, I'm going to take all my ugly carrots and I'm going to like cut down all the sides and everything and make them smooth. And then it's like, oh my gosh, everyone loves them. They're still just carrots, right? Like I tell people, like sliced apples is processed. You know, when you get the little sliced apple packs from the store, like they're fine. You know, it's still just apples.
Yes. And I've heard before, yeah, like people are like, oh, you shouldn't eat baby carrots because it's like the leftover parts of the big carrots. I'm like,
But it's just like
it's not a
chewing
hot
a big
dog.
carrot. Yeah, it's not a hot dog. It's not like
Like
all
all
the
the
parts of the
extra
carrots
stuff that
people
falls
don't
off.
want. It's just the inside of the carrot, which you're eating when you eat a large carrot. You know, it's, I think people definitely go a little wonky with it, but I'm telling you, if you're someone who is like stressed out about, I don't want anything processed, you got to kind of stop that, because unless you're like growing your own food and, you know, growing your own meat and milk and eggs and doing everything, you're going to have something processed, and that's okay. You just want to be mindful of, do I actually know the difference between processed and ultra processed, and how can I get strategic with the foods that I'm buying? Because there is going to be some things that make more sense to buy processed, right? Like frozen produce is actually cheaper, like canned beans can last longer, like, you know, and so it's like, okay, like let me kind of pick what it is I'm going to be doing. And that's okay. Like I think sometimes, like, you know, you watch like these TikTokers and they're like, I don't know, just paying like $3,000 a month for like llama milk, where like the llamas are like treat, like, you know, massage with essential
Yeah.
oils. Okay. And they're like, this is how you be healthy. Like you can still be healthy and eat processed foods. But what you really want to be mindful of is the ultra processed foods and really limiting how much you have of those. And I'll tell you, like, I feel like that's the thing I talk about with people the most, especially like my older patients, is like, oh, I wish I would have known this. Like, I wish I would have known the difference and like what I should have been watching out for, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's yeah, the main thing that I see popping up with like a lot of moms that I'm working with now with that have older kids, like we fed our kids Go-Gurts and everything. Like that's just like what we did. We didn't know any better, and now we're like, oh, son of a gun, what did I do to my child?
I always think about that. I was like, I'm doomed. Like how
Yeah,
I was raised in the 90s and the early 2000s, like you guys, I'm destined to have some.
we turned out okay. It's fine. We turned
Yeah,
out
look,
okay. It's
we're living. We're
yes.
living.
You
The
just
more
learn
you
how to adjust.
know, the more you know. And I, you know, I think right now, like it used to be the argument that like healthy food was so much more expensive. I think everything is expensive right now.
Oh yeah.
I did. I went down the cereal aisle the other day and I was like, $8 for a thing of pumpkin Cheerio. I was like, absolutely not. That's going to last one morning and people are still going to be hungry. Like, I'm not doing it.
Hmm. Yes.
Every,
And so let's to like close this episode out, let's give a few tips on like how can you switch up your foods, decrease ultra processed without going bankrupt. So, well, one thing I will point out, so Aldi, I don't shop there as much as I used to. I'm more of a Kroger gal now because that's where we buy formula. But Aldi, their products have no synthetic dyes in them. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that Aldi doesn't have products with synthetic dyes. It's their like store brand products don't have the
right.
dyes
Yeah. That's
because
kind of
they have
cool.
like they have like their own version of a lot of like popular brands that they make their own store brand. But yeah, they don't have any synthetic dyes. Like there are edamame noodles. They're really ugly green, but it's because there's no like dye added to it to change the color.
Yeah. And honestly, if you think about it, a lot of the colors that we use are just to make things look more vibrant.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it's the same concept of like why people don't buy ugly produce, right? There's nothing wrong with it. They
Mhm.
just, people don't want ugly things. And I think that's a major reason why Kellogg's doesn't want to change Fruit Loops, is because it's so vibrant and it looks fun. And it's like, whatever. But that's pretty cool. I didn't know that about all these. I don't know of any stores here. Like we have Kroger's here. I don't think we have Aldi's, but I do know our major grocery store, HEB, like does have dietitians on staff that you can go talk to and they can help you shop and like look at food labels, which is really cool. But I would say like keep meals simple. Like try to have the majority of your meals coming from meat, eggs, vegetables, fruits, like the things that you can identify. If you are going to, buy packaged foods, I always say like turn around. Maybe we should do a food label thing, right? But like turn
I think
around.
we have one.
Do we?
Yes, we have an episode on
Oh,
nutrition labels.
yeah.
Maybe we
Go
should
look
just
at
go
that.
more in depth on it.
Yeah, but like turn it around and see like the ingredients. Like, do I recognize whole food sourced ingredients, right? Like if you look at the back of like the RX bars, it's like egg whites, dates, salt. Okay, I know what those things are. If you start to see like, okay, this is a really long list and it's like all these different chemical names, I would probably try to find a better swap for
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. And I would say that's a good general rule there. I mean, I've seen dietitians post this before. Where it's like, oh, a banana is made up of all of these things that you can't pronounce. I'm like, okay, like let's just use
Yeah.
our brains here for a second. Like,
Like a
let's
food
not
label.
overcomplicate it. And when you keep these meals simple, I think this is what can get some people hung up is that it's like when I'm trying to eat healthier, I'm trying to cook these meals, I have to look up a recipe for every single thing. So then we're on Pinterest for hours, and then it's like meal planning is like 3 hours long. And of course, you don't want to meal plan every week for 3 hours. So when it comes to keeping it simple, you don't have to have a recipe for every meal.
No,
Um,
I hate cooking
and
every day.
yes, I hardly ever use a recipe,
I won't do it.
just gotta throw things together. And then it's really nice because like your fridge doesn't get overstocked with all these like random sauces and everything. Like we keep it super simple.
Yeah.
Some recipes it'll be like, I don't know, like you'll use a rice wine vinegar or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like I just don't do them like that 'cause we don't really use that, a rice vinegar all the time. And so it's just easier to keep it simple. And I do different seasonings and sauces that we just have all the time. Like our seasonings is basically like salt, pepper, garlic, onion, Montreal, everything bagel seasoning,
Yeah.
turmeric. I think that's all we have. It's a
Yeah.
lot easier to find it in this like seasoning cabinet than having to like search through everything.
Yeah, like just, and I think like I always tell people like, why is eating a little bit easier over the summer, right? Everyone's like, oh, well, I grill up meat and we like put veggies on the grill
Mhm.
and like,
You're done.
make some potatoes. I'm like, cool. Like, let's do that all the time. Like,
Hmm.
just simple, keep it simple. I think it gets harder with the elaborate recipes. And I think that's what really like sums people up. So just, keep it simple. I would say the other thing too is like, forget the random filler snacks. Like try to have the majority of your snacks from like the whole food sources. And of course, you're going to have some processed foods, right? Like yogurt, I would say, yogurt with minimal added sugar is a great snack. Like cottage cheese, stuff like that. Like you can still have processed foods, but the minimal ones, and try to put some like fresh foods in there and rely on those whole foods first. Because again, you just don't want to be snacking on all of this ultra processed foods that doesn't even make you full. Anyways.
Hmm. And that's
Uh,
where we get the idea that like snacks are bad. Snacks are not
mhm.
bad. They can actually be very nutritious. What are you
Yeah.
snacking on? Make it half of a meal. Make it balanced with a protein, a fat, a fiber. You don't need all three, but at least two of those parts.
Yeah.
That's a real snack.
Hmm. Yeah, keep it like very simple. Yeah. And then I think the last thing would be take a break from supplements if you're doing a lot of supplements, right? Like if you are one of these people, I mean, we eat protein powder. I eat protein powder. This is where I get like really specific with like, I know I'm going to have an ultra processed food multiple times a week. I'm going to make sure it's a good sourced
Uh,
one.
yes. So I think when it comes to those supplements, like take a break from ones that you're not for sure that you need. If you know you're deficient in vitamin D, yes, take vitamin D.
Yeah.
Become more strategic with your supplements. If you're not focusing on these whole foods, you're not creating a good foundation anyway. So a lot of times, if you focus on these whole foods, you're going to get what you need out of it, and then you can do more of that targeted
Yeah.
nutrition. And that's the other part when it comes to like again the budgeting with healthier eating or making healthier choices. It's not always about like what can I trade this ultra processed food for like a better ultra processed food. That is definitely when the price goes up. Like if you like two different granolas, one that
Yeah.
has better ingredients, it's still ultra processed. Like it's still processed. Yes, it has better ingredients, so it's still a better option. But that's where it can get to be like, oh yeah, it is more expensive. But it, like apples, bananas, eggs, rice,
Yeah.
lentils, all these things, beans, a can of beans, things like
Yeah.
that, that is going to help you out in the long run. There is actually a study, it was released by the USDA, kind of exploring like, are healthy foods really more expensive? And it basically, I mean, it's like a 40-page long paper of everything about this study. But basically, they came to the conclusion that, where is it? So, what they did was they compared prices of healthy and less healthy foods using a couple different metrics. So, they took the price of food energy, so dollars per calorie, the price of edible weight, dollar per 100 edible grams, and the price of an average portion, dollar per average portion. So they also calculated the cost of meeting the recommendations for each food group based on USDA government guidelines. For
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the metrics except the price of food energy, they found that healthy foods cost less than less than healthy foods. So, I mean, there's the science right there for you on how
Yeah. And
not
what
more
that
expensive.
means
It's just like,
is
what are we doing? Yeah.
the high calorie, empty calorie foods are cheaper, but it's like, that's not really what we want. And I think you did bring up a good point when it's like, which one of the ultra processed foods is going to be more expensive? It is going to be the healthier one because, it's harder to keep shelf stable without like those certain like things. Like it just, there's reasons why the healthier ultra processed foods are more expensive. And this is where I'd say you don't need to be doing all of that then, like there is other ways to get stuff. Like there should be very minimal things. So you're like, I want to eat this ultra processed food. I want to have it be good quality. It shouldn't be like 5, 6, 7, 8 things that you're having throughout your week. It should be like specific things so that it's like, oh, okay, I do have more money for this better quality one than, all of these other things that I'm taking. And I think that is where people go wrong because they do a lot of supplements and powders and greens. And it's like, oh, I'm being so healthy. And I have to tell people all the time, like, if your healthy looks like multiple different supplements and powders rather than whole food, that's actually not that healthy. So you can't get like stumped up with that.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
you know.
Being healthy, I think, can look different for everyone. And
Mhm.
that's what everyone, I mean, I hear it all the time. Like, I eat really well. I eat really healthy. I eat blah, blah. I'm like, okay, I'm taking that with a grain of salt, to be honest, because I don't know what that means to you. My
Yeah.
version of eating healthy might look different than yours. To me, eating healthy is not skipping breakfast. It might not necessarily be a salad every day for lunch.
Right. And like, healthy is relative too, right? Like what's
Yeah.
healthy for one person might actually not be healthy for another person, depending on like what your body needs and any like diseases
Mhm.
that you have, or just anything. Like two people can both eat healthy for themselves and have it not be healthy for the other person. And yeah, healthy
Yes.
is so relative. And I'm always telling people that too. I'm like, well, what does healthy eating mean to you? And yeah,
Mhm.
those things are healthy. Those are healthy choices, but maybe it's not really what you need.
Yes. So we'll link that study in the show notes. We won't go
Yeah.
too far in depth in it because we'd be here for a minute, but
Yeah.
we will link it in the show notes if you want to check it out. But I do want to encourage you to be open-minded with making changes
Yeah.
and kind of like stop getting in your own way of all this because at the end of the day, a lot of times we just have that blocker of eating healthy is too expensive. Like we're not even going to try. Like that's already in our mind. Same thing with like if it tastes good, it's not good for you. It's already in our brain. So our brain is just looking for all that evidence.
Mm-hmm.
See where you can make swaps. Your kids don't need 14 different snacks in the pantry that are fruit snacks, granola bars, chips, pretzels. And if you're like, that's the only thing
Expensive.
like eat. Yeah,
That gets expensive.
yeah. If
Meh.
it's the only thing they will eat, you're the ones buying it. You are supplying it. And I know I'm not in this stage of being a mom yet, but I don't know, Brianna, if you wanted to weigh on that a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's like the same thing when, sometimes I'll see kids outpatient and it's like, well, bring in the whole family because this is more like a session with the parents, right? Like, yeah, your kids might like certain things and, that's a whole thing. And I get some kids are very picky and I get that. But at the end of the day, it is the parents making the decisions of what am I going to buy? What am I going to give my kid? And I do see it, especially like this weird turn when like kids become teenagers and parents want to be like upset with like their kids' eating habits or like, I actually hate seeing weight loss for kids outpatient. I hate it so much because I'm like, well, what do you like to snack on? And it's like, oh, my mom buys this and buys that. And it's like, well, okay, mom, we have to have a conversation too, because now you're just like shaming this kid for having certain eating habits and correlating like, oh, she looks like this because she eats too much, but like she's not grocery shopping for herself or preparing food or anything like that. So like it gets real wild, but it's like, we have to teach our kids how to have good habits. Like we have to teach them to like, look
Yep.
before they cross the street, have good sleep habits, have good screen time habits, have good, like, that's like our job. And so I think it's hard though, too, because I think parents weren't really told how to eat healthy either. And so it's like the blind
Yeah.
lead blind. And so it's just like thinking about, okay, if your kid is constantly wanting a ton of snacks, like I know my kids are snackers, they love to do that. I'm constantly like, we have very minimal snacks, like packaged snacks that we send. Like if we're home, you're eating something else first. You're getting something out of the fridge, something off, like, produce off the counter. That's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And to each their own. But I will say, buying a lot of like the snack foods is freaking expensive. So that is all expensive. So, and they're never
They're
full.
not doing anything.
My
Yes.
kids could like go through 3 snack bars in the sitting and be like, okay, was there a yogurt? Is there a string cheese? Like, I'm like, okay, well, we just blew through a box of Z bars and that was insane. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's all expensive. I think it just takes a little bit of sitting down and getting strategic. And again, if you need help with that, we can help with that.
And speaking of that, we will also put a link in the show notes of a Google form for you guys to fill out. We are brainstorming what we want to do to take mocktail minutes to the next level, really, really have like a exclusive group, so to say.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
fill out that form. Let us know like what you want if you want to be a part of exclusive mocktail minutes group.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's all I'll say about it for now because we don't want to like release too much and then do something else. So we're gonna wait till
Yeah.
we decide exactly what we want to do. But yeah, if you just fill it out, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, it'll be in the show notes. We'll also like share it on our stories occasionally here and there in the next couple weeks. But yeah, let us know how we can take this, what direction we can take.
Yes. All right, everybody. Remember, just do what works for your family. Do your best. Ask for help where you need it, and don't over stress about this. One step at a time.
We should have like a closeout tagline. Like I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and there's
Hmm.
this one, and her whole thing at the end is like, okay, until next time, be nice, stay safe, and don't murder anyone. It's funny.
Oh, that's fun.
Obviously, we can't say that, but we should, yeah,
I
do
mean,
it.
yeah, still don't murder anyone.
Do your best. We gotta know. ADHD. Okay.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.